I stood in front of the tall glass doors of the upscale restaurant where my father Richard was celebrating his 60th birthday. Warm golden light spilled from inside, reflecting off the glass and casting a blurred image of myself, a 31-year-old woman in an elegant dress, who still felt like she didn't belong. I had hesitated for a long time before deciding to come. If it weren't for my aunt, the only person in the family who genuinely cared, I wouldn't have stepped foot into this party. She had called me last week and gently said, "Lana, he's still your father. At least stop by and say hello. If it doesn't feel right, you can always leave." So here I was, fully aware that I would always be an outsider at events like this. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Soft music from a live band floated through the air, blending with the lively chatter of hundreds of guests. Just as I expected, my father had organized a lavish event, not just to mark his birthday, but to affirm his position in the business world. I walked toward the check-in table where name tags were neatly arranged, scanning the familiar names: Uncle Peter, Cousin Emily, family friend Mark. I finally found mine, but as I looked closer, I froze. The small tag didn't just read Lana. Beneath it, in delicate handwriting, were two added words: the burden. For a moment I thought I had misread it. I blinked, heart pounding. Behind me, a soft, unmistakably amused laugh rang out. I turned around, and unsurprisingly, there stood Margaret, my stepmother, holding a glass of red wine, her eyes gleaming. "Oh dear, Lana, you look so tense." "It's just a joke," she chuckled, the triumph in her gaze impossible to miss. A joke. I clenched the tag in my hand. Maybe to her it was funny, but to me it was a painful reminder that I had never truly belonged. My parents divorced when I was 9. At the time I didn't fully understand what it meant, only that my father no longer came home each night, and dinners were just me and my mom. At first he still showed he cared, taking me to the park on weekends, calling to check on school, but that changed a year later, when he remarried a polished, sharp woman with 2 kids of her own, Max and Olivia. From that point on, everything shifted. As a child I tried to adapt. I wanted my father to be happy. I hoped we could still be a real family, that I'd have a place in his life. But I was wrong. At first the changes were subtle. My father became more involved with his new family. He started forgetting our plans, but never missed Olivia's ballet recitals, or Max's soccer matches. Eventually it became obvious. Family dinners turned into quiet reminders that I was just an afterthought. Max and Olivia were celebrated, while I was pushed to the side. I was expected to do chores no one else had to. If Olivia made a mess, I was told to clean it. If Max didn't want to wash dishes, I was the one called. And if I ever spoke up, "Lana, you're older, be mature," my father would sigh, as though I was exhausting him. Margaret, meanwhile, never bothered hiding her feelings. She'd just smirk and say, "You're so self-centered." But the moment that truly broke me happened when my mother, despite her limited income, had saved every cent she could to open a college fund for me, something to ease my path through school. Then one day, I checked the account. It was empty. I didn't understand what had happened, until I overheard a conversation between my father and Margaret. "Richard, we have to pay Olivia's tuition," she said calmly. "If we don't send it soon, she could lose her spot at the academy." "I know," my father replied. "But that's Lana's fund. Lana can go to a public school," Margaret said smoothly. "She doesn't need something so expensive. Besides, she's not particularly gifted." There was a long silence. Then I heard my father sigh. "All right." Just like that, the money my mother had worked so hard to save was gone, spent on someone else's daughter. I confronted him. I yelled, demanding to know why. He just looked at me, tired. "I'll make it up to you someday," he said. But that day never came. After that, I barely spoke to him. The moment I turned 18, I left home. I earned scholarships, worked through college, and only showed up at family events when my aunt insisted. I thought maybe, just maybe, things had changed. But standing here now, in the middle of my father's extravagant celebration, holding a name tag labeled "The Burden," I knew the truth. Nothing had changed at all. Margaret was still Margaret. My father was still the man who never stood up for me. And in their eyes I was still just someone who didn't quite fit in. I slowly placed the name tag back on the table. This time, I wouldn't stay quiet. Margaret was still nearby, sipping her wine, acting like her little joke was nothing. But as the memories of being ignored, dismissed, and overlooked flooded back, I felt something shift inside me. I remembered the holidays during college, walking through the front door only to be reminded I no longer had a place there. My mother had tried to fight for the college fund that was taken from me, but my father had more resources, stronger legal support, and in the end, she lost. I still remember the day she came home from court, her shoulders trembling as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Lana. I tried my best." I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew tears wouldn't change anything. Instead, I threw myself into my studies, juggling multiple jobs to survive. I waited tables at a cafe, entered data at night for a small company, and even wrote freelance articles for an online news outlet, just to make ends meet. Through all 4 years of college, I never asked my father for a single cent, and he never offered. When I came home for the holidays, nothing was different. Margaret still played the role of the perfect wife. Max and Olivia were still the golden children, praised, celebrated, while I sat quietly at the table like an outsider. I could feel my father's discomfort every time his eyes met mine, and I noticed how he looked away whenever Margaret brought up Olivia's study abroad expenses. Costs he covered without hesitation, while I struggled to pay my own tuition alone. Eventually I stopped going home for the holiday. I declined invitations that felt more like formalities than genuine gestures. I stopped waiting for my father to change. But no matter how much distance I created, Margaret always found ways to remind me that I didn't belong, that I was still under her shadow. And today, at this extravagant celebration, she had done it again. I took a slow, deep breath. A faint smile curled at my lips, as I turned to meet Margaret's eyes. "You're always so careful, aren't you?" I said, my voice steady, calmer than I expected. "Have you figured out how you're going to explain this to my father yet?" Margaret paused for just a second, then recovered with a smirk, as if I were being overly dramatic. "Oh Lana, you're always so sensitive. It was just a joke. Everyone knows that." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "So if I tell everyone here that you wrote it, do you think they'll laugh too?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, quickly masked. "Lana, you're overreacting. This is your father's birthday. Don't ruin it for him." I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "You're worried I'll ruin his night. Maybe you should have thought about that before making me the punchline of your joke." Before she could reply, I picked up a glass of champagne from a nearby table and walked toward the center of the room, where my father stood surrounded by well-dressed guests, laughter and conversation echoing around him. Max was boasting about his new job, one I was sure had been handed to him thanks to my father's connections. Olivia, as always, was glowing as she talked about her upcoming lavish wedding, a celebration largely paid for by my father. I stood still for a moment, watching the man I once idolized, the man who had been my entire world as a child, and who now felt like a stranger. He noticed me, his eyes widened slightly, as if surprised I was even there. "Lana," he said, looking uneasy, "I didn't think you'd come." I offered a small smile. Neither did I. I noticed Olivia and Max exchange glances before looking over at Margaret, who lingered behind them, trying to maintain her composure. "Everyone seems to be having a great time," I said, gently swirling the champagne in my glass. "I suppose you're pleased, seeing everything go exactly as planned." My father took a sip of his drink, clearly thinking through his response. "Can we talk later, Lana? This isn't the right time." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time," I said, cutting in, my tone calm but firm. I slowly raised my champagne glass, and tapped a fingernail against its rim, the soft clink catching a few nearby guests' attention. I smiled slightly. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, "to my father." I saw his expression tighten. Margaret narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "To my father for throwing the perfect party, for building the perfect life, and for having the perfect family," I said, my voice light, but edged with irony. "Here's to him, for teaching me a very valuable lesson." I paused, let the words hang, let them echo. "I think you've had a bit too much to drink," Margaret interjected, her smile still pasted on, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of alarm. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the silence stretch, let the weight of my presence settle into the room like a dropped stone in still water. My father looked like he wanted to intervene, but he also knew that anything he said now would only make it worse. "I'm completely sober," I said calmly, lifting the glass again, slowly scanning the room. "But maybe, some people here just aren't ready to hear the truth." A few guests shuffled awkwardly, quietly distancing themselves, hoping not to get caught in the crossfire. Max folded his arms, clearly amused. Olivia rolled her eyes, lightly tapping her nail on the rim of her glass. "In fact," I continued, my tone smooth and steady, "I'd like to express my gratitude." I took a breath. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Margaret, for teaching me one of the most important lessons of my life, a lesson I will never, ever forget." My father frowned, starting to speak. "Lana, this isn't." I raised a hand, stopping him gently, with a polite smile. "It's okay, Dad. Just a simple thank you speech. Margaret took another sip of wine, her posture still composed, but I noticed the white-knuckled grip on the stem of her glass. Thank you, I said, for showing me that love, at least in this family, comes with conditions, that you're only accepted when you play your part. Stay quiet, stay small, stay convenient. I turned, eyes locking with Margaret's, and thank you, for always reminding me that I was never really welcome here. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room, some guests glanced around nervous, others stared at their drinks, pretending not to listen, but most importantly, I placed my champagne glass, gently on the table. Thank you for helping me realize I don't need anyone's approval here to know my own worth. The room fell silent. I looked at each of them, my father, Margaret, Max, Olivia, and then I lifted the glass one last time, a faint smile on my lips. To the last time any of you will ever see me. I finished the drink in one smooth motion, set the glass down, and turned. No one spoke, no one stopped me. I walked straight out the door. The cold night air hit my face like a reset button. I inhaled deeply. The chill was sharp, but it was real, unlike the suffocating air I'd left behind. For the first time in years I felt free. When I got home, my phone buzzed non-stop. Calls, messages, 3 missed calls from my father, 2 from Margaret. Even Olivia had sent a terse text. What the hell did you just do? I set the phone down without responding. My voicemail was flooded with long, urgent messages. Lana, you can't just do this. We're family. We need to stick together. We need to be there for each other. I stared at the screen and hit delete. We weren't a family. A real family. A real family doesn't make you feel like a stranger in your own skin. Only one message made me pause. Are you okay, Lana? It was from my aunt, the only person who had ever been on my side. I picked up the phone, hesitated a second, then typed back, I'm better than ever. In the weeks that followed, I didn't show up to any more events, not Olivia's wedding, not my father's anniversary party, not a single gathering hosted by Margaret, and the world didn't end. They expected me to come crawling back, apologize, regret, bend, but I didn't. Instead, I built something new. I traveled, met people who valued me for me, built a career with no help, no shortcuts, and no guilt. And most importantly, I stopped needing my father's approval like oxygen. One day, a letter arrived. From him. Lana, I hope you'll reconsider. I don't want our family to be broken. Please come home and talk. No matter how upset you are, we are still family. I folded the letter and set it down, didn't read it again. My eyes drifted over the neat handwriting, but it didn't spark anything. No pain, no longing, no ache for what might have been. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue across the roof. The world outside glowed with soft amber light, and for the first time I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. I took a deep breath, letting the quiet of my apartment settle around me. A few months ago, a letter like this would have broken. I would have called him immediately, asked what he meant, asked if maybe, just maybe, we could fix things. But now I wasn't so sure. Had I done the right thing? Was cutting ties with my father and his world too much, too final? I never meant to be cruel. I never thought I'd walk away for good. But I also never wanted to keep playing the role of the burden, the afterthought, the outsider. For years I held on to hope that one day my father would see me for who I really was. Not difficult, not dramatic, just someone trying to be seen, to be valued. Maybe that hope was never real. I stood, poured myself a cup of tea, and wrapped my hands around the mug's warmth. I reminded myself, I didn't have to answer the letter. Not now, maybe not ever. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe I had embarrassed him in front of everyone. Maybe I'd hurt him in a way I couldn't take back. But maybe it was long overdue. I had spent my whole life trying to earn his approval, sacrificing my own feelings, swallowing my pain, staying silent through the favoritism, the dismissals, the indifference, all for a seat at a table that was never really mine. And that birthday party, it wasn't the beginning, it was the last straw. It showed me, no matter what I did, I would never be enough in their world. I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread through me. Maybe I'll never have a clear answer. Maybe I'll always wonder if I went too far. But one thing I do, since that night, I've slept better. I breathe easier. I no longer carry the weight of pretending. So what exactly did I lose? I glanced at my phone. The missed calls were still there. My father, Margaret, distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. I used to feel pressure to reply. Now at peace. I set the phone down, and stepped onto the balcony. The evening air was crisp, clean, honest in a way my family never was. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if my father will keep reaching out, or if one day he'll finally and maybe one day I'll regret walking away. But today I chose myself, and maybe that's what matters most. A few weeks passed, life moved on, in a calm rhythm, without emotional storms or sharp turns. I woke up each morning not with anxiety, but with curiosity. What will I choose for myself today? It turned out that loneliness wasn't a punishment. It was a quiet, gentle companion. I learned how to be a family to myself. I cooked meals I loved, put flowers in vases, bought books I'd long dreamed of, not because I had earned them, but because I simply wanted to. Sometimes in the evenings, I still found myself checking my phone out of habit, muscle memory, but there was no anger, no expectation anymore, only a faint sorrow, not for what I had lost, but for the years I had stayed silent when I should have spoken, when I gave in instead of standing up for myself. One day, I found a postcard in my mailbox, no return address, just familiar handwriting. Thinking of you, I hope you're happy, Dad. I held it in my hands for a long time. No tears, no fury, just the sense that someone had knocked on a door I'd long since closed. But I didn't open, not because I didn't care what he had to say, but because I no longer intended to return to a place where I was never truly welcome. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't even blame him anymore. I simply let go, because forgiveness isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's permission to move on without looking back. The longer I lived in this new space, the clearer it became. I hadn't lost a family. I had freed myself from the illusion that I ever had one. Sometimes when I walk through the park and see a father laughing with his daughter on a bench, something clicks quietly inside me. Not pain, just a memory of something I never had. And still I smile, because now, I no longer seek those moments to cut and paste into my imagination and pretend they were mine. I just live my own life, a real one. Recently, I started a blog. I share stories, mine and others. People write to me, tell me their own experiences, and I see, I'm not alone. There are so many of us. The ones who grew tired of begging for love, tired of proving we were worthy of it, the ones who finally chose themselves, even if that choice came with silence and solitude. And maybe, one day, years from now, my father and I will meet again, not as father and daughter but as two grown adults, equals. I don't rule that out, but I know this for sure. I'm not waiting, not holding on, not hoping. I'm free, and if anyone says I was cruel, so be it. But it was honesty, and it saved my soul. What do you think? Did I go too far, or was this something I should have done a long time ago? Lana's story isn't just personal. It's something many people live through, trying to earn love that should have been unconditional, fighting to be seen by the very people who refuse to look. Sometimes walking away isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only way to survive. Because not everyone born into a family truly has one, and everyone deserves the right to choose peace, even if that means choosing it alone. Let us know what you think in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, healing and the lessons that shape us.